what I'll do right now, Rhythm, for our viewers is take everyone through the kind of progress we've made in the last 10 years and compare that with the progress in the previous 10. So you get a sense of what has happened in India across various parameters in the past decade. So we'll start with national highways measured in 1,000 kilometers. Between 2006 and 2014, and all of this is for the fiscal year, we had 25.7 thousand kilometers. That from 2015 to 2023 went up to 53.7 thousand kilometers. Let's now look at broadband subscriber base, which between 2006 to 2014 stood at 58.9 million subscribers. From 2015 to 2023 went up to a whopping 771.3 million subscribers. Let's now look at renewable energy, this in gigawatts. From 2006 to 2014 stood at 25.7. In the past decade, 95.7 gigawatts of renewable electricity. Let's look at railway routes which have been electrified, again expressed as 1,000 kilometers. Earlier it was 4.1 thousand kilometers, which was 6.3% of the total railway routes were electrified. Now 42.3% of the total railway routes are electrified, which is 28.8 thousand kilometers. So if I were to look at this data, Rhythm, and I wanted to look at digital transactions as well, in FY 2017, digital transactions as a percentage of GDP stood at 8. Next year it went up to 12, then 21, 29, 40, 58, now 76%. As a percentage of GDP, 76% of transactions are digital. Now this, Rhythm, is quite phenomenal, and you at Morgan Stanley would be able to compare how India is progressing on these parameters with the kind of progress that's been achieved in other countries of the globe. And when you do that, of course India is growing, but how is India growing in your view across these parameters in comparison to the rest of the world, especially those countries that are in India's peer set?
So Rahul, I think in terms of, say, digital economy, I think we've made far more progress than the rest of the world. So let me just give you one example. India is less than 4% of world GDP, but accounts for around 40% of all digital transactions. So the irony here is that if you look at modern things, India is actually progressing much faster. Some of the more painful things to fix are in the infrastructure space. So that's where we lag behind considerably since independence. And there's a fair bit of catch up to do. And there's still more catch up to do over the next 10 years. We still need to add a lot more to our infrastructure. So I think when you look at India, I think in soft metrics like digital, like say services exports, we're doing very well. In hard stuff like physical infrastructure, we've lagged behind. Now there has been some catch up in the last 10 years, but we have some more miles to travel before we can say that we are at developed nation status. It may take more than a decade to get there.
One of the things that concern me as I look at the percentage of GDP which is being invested in, we go back to 2001 where it stood at 26%, going up to 35% in 2005. In 2017, for example, it's at 32%. In 2021 at 27%. Now, what you're seeing on that graph are the estimates for the future, where in 2025, you're anticipating that investment as a percentage of GDP will stand at 35, 2029 at 34, 2033 at 33. So you're not really seeing investment as a percentage of GDP go up very dramatically. Is that something that concerns you? Because from what I understand, at a time when countries like Japan, South Korea and China were really at the fastest pace of their growth trajectory, investments as a percentage of GDP constantly seem to be going up.
Yeah, so that has been a problem, and I think two big changes have happened in the last 5-7 years, which make me quite optimistic about the investment share of GDP. So the first is that we have managed to reduce subsidy burden. And the reason why we've been able to do that is because of direct benefits transfer. So again, this is down to technology and it's down to India Stack. The government is able to identify intended beneficiaries and is able to transfer cash or kind to those people without any leakages. So, if you take out the COVID period, because during COVID, these expenditures did have to go up, but if you X out the COVID period, we have managed to actually shave a considerable amount of subsidy expenditure, which was largely leakage in the system. That money has now been put into infrastructure. So it has released capital for the government to build more infrastructure. The other thing that has happened is that there is a much better environment for investments in the corporate sector, private corporate sector. So the private corporate sector enjoys lower taxation, enjoys production-linked incentives. For the first time in the history of this country, the government is taking tax dollars and giving it to companies and telling them, go and invest. And I think you will see an upside surprise on the investment cycle. Now, this works very well for the country, as you very rightly point out, because when companies invest, they create jobs. When they create jobs, they create wages, and you get a virtuous cycle of prosperity until, of course, the investment ratio goes through the roof and then, things start getting messy. But at the starting point where we are in terms of, say, balance sheets, in terms of the investment ratio, I think these numbers are only going to go up in the next 5 years. The other thing which I'll highlight here is that the forces around the world are aligning in India's favor. So there is a China plus one happening. So a lot of companies are looking to diversify away from China, and India is a natural place to go to. Why? One is, of course, as I pointed out, there are government incentives and there's a better environment to do business. But two, most significantly, India is one of the best places in terms of markets. I think you spoke about that earlier. It is a place where I think a lot of companies are going to try and build their markets and try to grow their revenues. So companies will find it very attractive to be in India over the next 10 years, which is why I think this investment ratio is going up, and that's good for the economy.